This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
And welcome to Street Knowledge. I am Chris Graham, and we're going to talk wrestling today. I've got some notes written here, and I wanted to show you. These are really detailed notes. But we'll be following our notes here, looking ahead to the Smackdown brand pay-per-view for Hell in a Cell, but also looking back at last week's show, the Raw branded No Mercy pay-per-view, which, if you read Augusta Free Press wrestling coverage on a regular basis, you might have seen that I was looking forward to that show last week. I was really looking forward to that show because of the two big matches at the top of the card that really felt like main event matches. Both main event matches for No Mercy, but also for one of the bigger shows of the year, a SummerSlam, maybe even WrestleMania. You had John Cena and Roman Reigns in a matchup of two guys. I think there was one fan in the crowd who had a sign that he held up a couple times early in the match. You both suck. The two baby faces of WWE, Cena, of course, dating back many years, over a decade, as the company's top baby face, who still doesn't quite get over with all fans, but definitely gets a reaction from all fans. And Roman Reigns, who is on paper the next John Cena in lots of ways. Having those two guys match up was a fun, creative booking kind of decision. And then you had Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman on the heels of their interactions, I guess, because it was the Fatal 4-Way at SummerSlam involving Lesnar, Strowman, Samoa Joe, and Reigns. We had just a couple tastes of Strowman and Lesnar there, and it really felt like, man, you know, what we tasted there, we wanted a bigger bite of coming up sometime soon, and we got it the next month at No Mercy. And so I was looking forward to that one, knowing, of course, I mean, yeah, Lesnar's limited in what he can do because of his style. He's you know, we call Shinsuke Nakamura, who we'll talk about later in the podcast, he's called the king of hardcore, but man, oh man, or the king of strong style, excuse me, the king of strong style. But Lesnar is the king of strong style, and he can't really wrestle any other way. It's hard for him to work with high flyers. It's hard for him to work with really anybody else other than other big guys because of his style. He has a style that has devolved over the years. Remember back when he was a young buck, back in the early days of Lesnar, before his first run in UFC. Man, he was doing moonsaults off of top ropes. I mean, really adapted the pro game in a similar way that Kurt Angle did as a guy who was a hardcore, could have been a shoot wrestler and been very successful at that. But Lesnar, since his return from diverticulitis, say that one time real fast, after his UFC run back 7-8 years ago, he's been a ground and pound guy. And with Strowman being a ground and pound guy as well, Strowman's a guy that WWE really marketed well, dating back to last summer when they broke him away from the Wyatt family, gave him that string of squash matches against much smaller opponents to really sell him as a monster, and built him up as this just indomitable force. And then, of course, continuing that all the way through the SummerSlam main event, that 4-way match where he just ripped through Lesnar, threw him through one table, picked him up, threw him through another table, then picked up a third table and threw it on him. A couple power slams, and you felt like, wow, this is going to be a great match. Let's talk about that one first as it played out at No Mercy. It really didn't play out as the great match, to say the least, that it was advertised as. Strowman controlled the action, playing face, if you want to say, I guess, in using the kayfabe, behind the kayfabe parlance. Lesnar took some abuse, took a couple of big power slams, but Strowman after I guess there were, if I can mentally think, 3 power slams in the match. The first one he covered early in the match and got a 2 count, but not quite, wasn't much more than a 2. The second and third power slams at a time when Lesnar would have been, from a psychology standpoint, more debilitated in the match. Strowman was not able to get even an attempt at a cover. So maybe that's a way to sell, hey, he did his move, just didn't get a chance to cover, and keep him strong. But then Lesnar really just won F5, and that's the match, and that's the way this one ends. And what a come down from where we were before. Obviously, we'll talk about Reigns Cena, but obviously the idea is to keep the belt on Lesnar through WrestleMania, which for fans, and I watched the show with a couple of relatives who I haven't watched wrestling with in a while. They're hardcore wrestling fans. Honestly, they could be on this podcast with me right now. We could have a very entertaining podcast. Uh, and they think behind the scenes. They think like writers do. And it was interesting, the interplay as we were discussing this. Not having watched wrestling with them in a long time, the impression was, what a loss it is for WWE that they've decided to go on their flagship program Raw with a part-time champion. Because now that we've seen Lesnar at SummerSlam at No Mercy, we can presume we're not going to see him again for a while in storylines. And so now your top title is not going to be defended on your top show, theoretically, maybe up until Royal Rumble, at least the walk up to a Royal Rumble. And we know where this is going too. The win for Reigns over John Cena in that matchup of the hated baby faces tells us that where things are going is in the direction of Reigns Lesnar at WrestleMania, and that doesn't move my needle. I mean, that's 6-7 months out. I already don't care. I'm already not interested in that match. They'll have to do some other things to get me interested as a fan in the product leading up to WrestleMania. That's tired booking. We've already seen it once. We already had that walk up once a couple years ago. Of course, Seth Rollins with the Money in the Bank briefcase stole the show, and that was a memorable show because of the booking that led to Rollins walking out with the belt when nobody presumed that was even a possibility. So we've already seen Reigns Lesnar once booked as a main event for WrestleMania, and honestly, the reason that Rollins was given that opportunity to run with the belt was because it was determined that Reigns wasn't moving the needle. So, but getting back to Reigns Cena, it was a predictable match for those two guys. Cena got a lot of moves in, got a lot of offense in. I think there were 4 of his attitude adjustments and 1 super AA from the top rope, really making Reigns look strong because he kicked out of all of them, including the super AA. And then Reigns gets the pinfall with a simple spear. That booking obviously is to make Reigns look really strong. Congratulations, you've done that. At the expense of knowing, kind of signaling where things are going to go here, I guess. Sorry, I got some allergies. I have to keep touching my nose. I'm sniffling a little bit here. The weather's changing, and that's affecting me right now. So we know Reigns and Lesnar are where we're headed for one of the main event slots at WrestleMania. And that's kind of boring this far out to know that's where WWE is going, and also that it's just not that interesting as far as that goes. We've also got, now seeing how Seth Rollins, the next couple of weeks, is being booked as a singles guy. The Shield, he and Ambrose are now booked as the tag champions, and giving them belts is maybe some kind of a throw out to them, reach out to them to say, hey, we still think you're worthy right now of main event status, but a kind of throw together tag team of 2 great singles competitors. Remember, it was just last summer that those 2 guys were the number 1 draft picks in the Raw SmackDown split brand draft, and now they're the tag team champions on one of the shows, wrestling nightly against Cesaro and Sheamus. And nothing against Cesaro and Sheamus, but that's an interesting place to put 2 recently former number 1 draft picks on your brand split. But Rollins will be wrestling on Raw coming up Monday night against Braun Strowman, and that's the kind of match that actually can bring out the best in a Braun Strowman. Strowman, again, I talked earlier about how he's still green, he's still limited in the ring, and of course he's such a big man. I don't know what he's listed at, but he looks 6'8"-ish, maybe 350, 360, and a pretty solid 350, 360. Now, there are some guys that at 350, 360 look like they should be about 250 because they're all fat. Strowman is not. He's a big, strong man, but he's limited in what he can do. And also, the way he's booked, there's a believability factor. If he takes moves from smaller guys like a Rollins and goes to the ground, then he's not believable as a monster anymore. But with what Rollins can do, Rollins is a tactician. He reminds me of a Shawn Michaels. He reminds me of a Bret Hart, and he's the kind of guy that I think can really help elevate the kind of game that Strowman can bring to the match. So I'd look forward to maybe seeing those 2 guys, have some sort of a controversial finish on Monday night, and maybe work together some more in the future. That, of course, what that does is puts tag belts in limbo, but that can easily be solved. Have them lose the belts, maybe Strowman interferes, and let's see if we can do something more. Let's give Strowman something to do. Let's give Rollins something better to do, um, and kind of move on. So let's think ahead now. So I love the fact sometimes it's a little exhausting that WWE's gone to this two pay-per-views per month model that we've now seen. But also it can be like this time of year, this time of the month, I guess you can say, is really nice because we're a week out from the pay-per-view we just saw, No Mercy, and we're a week ahead of the next big one, Hell in a Cell. And it's one of my favorite pay-per-views of the year. It's not quite the status of, let's say, your Royal Rumble, your WrestleMania, SummerSlam, but it's probably close. And let's see, I got a question actually. Let's go ahead and answer the question. I love this live functionality. We'll get back to Hell in a Cell in just a second. A question from Anthony Young: how is Roman's flexibility? Can he high fly? You know, you see Roman for a big guy, and I remember I also cover sports. I've covered college sports, ACC college sports, for about 20 years. And I remember Roman Reigns. He, of course, that's not his real name. His real name is Joe Anoa'i. He played defensive line at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech being an ACC school, I actually had to write Joe Anoa'i's name down. I vote on the All ACC teams every year as a sports writer, and I remember he was second team all ACC defensive tackle around, I think it was 2006 was his senior year at Georgia Tech. Good player, but he was a much bigger, thicker guy. You know, think of defensive tackles in pro football, college football. If you think of their builds, they're more squat guys. Defensive tackles, defensive ends are your guys who are more on the defensive line, who are more athletic. They're the guys who have to rush around the edge to get to the quarterback. The tackles are the guys in the middle of the line who have to kind of eat up the blockers to allow the linebackers to make the play. So Roman Reigns, Joe Anoa'i, big, thick guy. I mean, he had his face looked different. And his body looked different. Since he's transitioned from football to wrestling, he looks like he's lost maybe 25, 30 pounds in a good way. He's really slimmed down, but in a toning kind of way. Still big, strong guy, but he's now the guy you see on TV. He's a much lither guy, if you want to say. And so think about Roman Reigns when he's out there. He one of his moves, he actually will run across, bounce off the ropes and go back across the ring and do one of those dives over the top rope. That's an athletic move for any size guy, much less a guy who's about 6'5", about 260, 265. So Reigns, I wouldn't sell him as a high flyer, but I think it's part of his repertoire. It's a good part for a big guy's repertoire to have him be able to fly across the ring the way he does, and also do the strong stuff he does. He obviously he is a big, powerful guy, kind of guy who can throw guys around when he needs to. But Roman Reigns is a great athlete. He's transitioned from being, he was on a couple of training camp rosters in the NFL. And like a lot of guys, for example, one of his distant cousins, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson was a player at the University of Miami back in the 1990s, had a couple of cups of coffee in the CFL, and that didn't work out. Goes to wrestling, great athlete, gets to do what he's done, what he was able to do in the ring, and now, of course, in Hollywood as well. Things worked out for him really well, and things worked out for Roman Reigns too. There's one thing about being a backup defensive tackle, probably on somebody's practice squad, and another thing about being pushed by WWE to be the big star in main event WrestleManias and that kind of thing. So I think Reigns can certainly hold his own as a high flyer, but I love his diversity of moveset. Anthony asks, so he's more like a Goldberg, but WWE pretty much took over. Maybe. I don't know that Goldberg was the kind of guy, and because Goldberg certainly was a football player. He actually had more success in the football field. He did play in the NFL for parts of a couple of seasons. Goldberg, though, Reigns can do a little bit of high flying stuff for a big guy. I don't remember Goldberg ever jumping over ropes. Probably a good thing. Sometimes big guys go to the ropes and try to do things that they can't do. I'm thinking about Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, whatever you remember him as. Big guy. Lord Humongous way back in the day. 6'8", about 320, muscle on top of muscle. And remember one time, and I was watching this pay-per-view. It's a WCW pay-per-view. I want to say it was a Halloween Havoc back in the late 90s, 96, 97. And he decided, he was, the folks behind the scenes were saying, hey, Sid, you need to do some stuff off the ropes, man. Now, he's 6'8", 316. What his sales pitch is I'm a big man and I can beat up anybody I want to. goes on the top rope to do his big signature big boot move. His that was his finishing move. Was he whip his opponent across the ring and bounce him off the ropes, and then give him a big boot to the face. Well, he decides to do a big boot off the top rope. Well, that's great. Never practiced the move. If he had, he wouldn't have wrestled a match because he does the big boot where he lands on one leg and kicks out with the other. That's the big boot. Thinks, hey, if you do what you do off the top rope, that's better. That's more powerful, right? Well, except when you land 316 pounds off the top rope onto one leg. That one leg, I don't care how big and strong you are, that one joint there, that the area between your knee and your foot and all that stuff, that's not equipped. I don't care how strong you are, how much weight you lift, whatever else you do. That part of the body is not equipped to take all that weight landing from 6-8 feet in the air and then a few feet out from the ropes. Broke his leg, snapped it horribly right there live on TV. It was ugly. Even thinking about it 20 years later, my stomach's turning. So, so it's not always a good thing that big guys do big stuff like that. Sid learned a lesson. He came back, maybe a year later, and he was clearly never the same. He wasn't big guys like that don't move very well anyway. He before the injury, he wasn't very mobile. He certainly wasn't mobile after that. He was never the same. But Reigns has got the athletic ability. He doesn't have the mic ability. That's the thing that is still his drawback. WWE has covered for Brock Lesnar not having mic ability by putting him so expertly with Paul Heyman for all these years. Heyman can talk. Obviously, Heyman can talk. I never understood why they put Paul Heyman with CM Punk like they did, because CM Punk can talk his way out of a paper bag too. But putting Heyman with Lesnar, that's a great team. It masked the deficiencies, because all Brock Lesnar could pretty much do is say, "I'm going to kick your ass, bitch," and stuff like that. That's about all he can do. He's not much more verbose than that. But then you put him with Heyman, who is the smartest guy, it seems like, in wrestling, certainly on the mic. He's the most talented guy alive right now, and I say that because Bobby Heenan just passed in professional wrestling. Great move. So, I would love to see WWE smarten up and take away the one criticism we all have of Roman Reigns, which is that he is horrible on the mic. He is just abysmal on the mic, and give him a mouthpiece. Maybe what they say is a good guy doesn't need a mouthpiece, a babyface doesn't need a mouthpiece, but he does, because I can only imagine. I mean, they've been giving him this main event level push for about 3 years now, maybe longer than 3 years now. And if he hasn't learned it yet, he's not going to. He's just not going to. I mean, either you've got it or you don't. I've worked in the media business for 20 years. I've pretty early in my career. I'm in my mid-40s now. When I was in my mid-20s, I was already doing whatever I could do in terms of radio and TV. But luckily for me, whatever I've got that's got people's attention right now, for example, it was natural. It's either you got it or you don't. I worked with people who, especially back in my early mid-20s, who were coming out of college programs, have degrees in broadcasting, but you can't teach. You can't teach natural chutzpah. You can't teach talking ability. You can't teach giving someone a mic and have them be interesting. So a lot of those guys who have those degrees with broadcast backgrounds, who can't talk, who can't do it on the mic, end up working behind the scenes. They run the boards. They end up being producers of shows. They end up being station manager type people, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not at all. They didn't go to school for that, but they end up being behind the scenes. And I love being in front of the scenes. I also ended up, because of what I do, I'm a small operation. I end up doing the behind the scenes stuff too. My wrestling work in the wrestling business started 6 years ago with the company Awesome Wrestling Entertainment, and I designed a website for them. And then they found out that I was a big wrestling fan. I ended up sitting in some booking meetings, got to help write a pay-per-view show. But among the things I did was, hey, we got a video camera. We need to do the interviews to help sell this pay-per-view. Do you have any ability to do that? Well, I was the person on the staff most equipped to do it, because I had been in front of the camera for years, working on TV shows. So I taught myself behind the camera stuff. Going podcasting, same thing. If you want to do it, you got to do it yourself sometimes. So, but anyway, that's really digressing. But Roman Reigns, he doesn't have it at this point. I'm sure he's been getting acting lessons. He's been getting speaking classes, whatever things you could possibly do, just not working. And so that's fine. Maybe put him with a mouthpiece. and things can get better for him, and the heat can come off, and he can just be Roman Reigns. Um, yeah, Raven, Anthony. I'm still talking with Anthony Young here. And Anthony, thanks for your questions and your comments. That's why Raven was so good. Good psychology. He knew how stuff worked and how people react to certain things. And man, Raven was, Raven in the ring as a young guy when he was young and the up and coming guy that was, he was Scotty. What was he? Scotty the Body. Well, he was back in his early days, early days back in Memphis wrestling before he made his way up to ECW, WCW, back and forth. Um, he was actually a muscle man, a sort of a 220, 225 muscle man, before he evolved into the guy that he became, that we all know as Raven, the brooding, master psychology, master Mike guy who was the lead of these stables and that kind of thing. Again, you have it or you don't. And Raven had it, and has it, I should say. He has a podcast I listen to. So, he's still. There are guys who know the psychology. I've worked with Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express, now WWE Hall of Famer, a lot over the years, both from helping plan shows capacity, creative capacity, to just interview capacity. And boy, if you ever get a chance to sit down and talk with Ricky Morton for 10 or 15 minutes, just say hi, Ricky, and let him start talking. That's all you need to do. That man knows more, forgotten more about wrestling, etc., than any of us will ever know. And it's fun talking to guys like that. But again, it's just a natural thing. That is my dream, to work the background psychology. Anthony, I am actually writing what will be a short book about my experiences working in the wrestling business. It'll be, hopefully, I'm supposed to be wrapping it up. The original goal was to wrap it up in September. Today's the last day of September. That ain't happening. I ain't finishing it today. But I'll be writing about the book. I'm hoping will be out now, maybe by Thanksgiving-ish. It'll be all online. It'll be cheap, inexpensive, $5.99 book. But it's going to be a examination of my 6 years or so, very small level of wrestling. I don't want to claim anything more than I've got as we're talking here and podcasts and everything else. But I did get to work with that company, Awesome Wrestling Entertainment, that put on a pay-per-view back in 2011. And I got to help book the show. I got to help write the storylines for the show. When I watch the show still now, and it's been on Netflix, there's DVDs out and that kind of thing, and I hear the announcers. We had Larry Zbyszko, Dutch Mantell, Chris Cruz as our commentary team. And I hear them reading the words. Those are words that we wrote. I helped write a lot of those words. I helped develop the storylines. Kevin Nash and Dom Dallas Page against Rock and Roll Express. We built characters. We built a character around Muhammad Akbar. At the time, Muhammad Ali Valles, the guy playing that character, didn't really like the fact that we wrote him as a bad guy, but now he's doing that in TNA, and he's got the name. And I'm not sure if he's Muhammad Akbar, but I looked it up the other day, and he's using a very similar gimmick as we wrote for him 6 years ago. So it's fun. It is a lot of fun, and pursue it. The only thing that can happen is the only way you can guarantee that you won't get into the wrestling business is if you don't try. And I'd say that Anthony, you're out there watching right now. Thanks for doing that. And I would just say, I grew up as a wrestling fan from the time I was a little kid, and I got to work with some of the big guys in the business. I've had the pleasure and fortune to be able to work with guys like Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels and Diamond Dallas Page and Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and the Rock and Roll Express, of course, I mentioned, Goldust. I'm sure I'm leaving lots of folks out that I've been able to work with closely because of just basically being persistent and being able to do it. And I'm not really doing it actively now, to say the least, but at least I'm using that, whatever knowledge I got from those years doing that, maybe can help make sense of wrestling for fans out there. But yeah, pursue it, man. Pursue it. Again, the worst thing can happen is that you don't try, and then as a result, you never get to be involved. So let's get back now to Hell in a Cell. And okay, so I was excited about No Mercy. So take my excitement about the Hell in a Cell card that we have coming with a grain of salt, right? Because I was really excited about No Mercy. It turned into, to me, a dud of a show. But I look at this card, and I'm even leaving off in my notes here the Charlotte versus Natalya match. Charlotte Flair, they're calling her by that full name now, versus Natalya match. I'm not a big Natalya fan. I'm a big Charlotte fan. I'll just say this real quick, and then I'll get back to No Mercy. I keep diverting, which is it's a good thing. I had this thought the other day, and I think it's a clear thought. 205 Live has its own TV show. I think the women's division needs its own show. Put all the women on one roster. and let's have a full promotion almost. Give them, a world title. Give them their version of a U.S. or Intercontinental title. Give them tag team champions, and let's have them all go at it. I hated on No Mercy that there was a five woman title match. They keep doing this. Summer at WrestleMania there was a 6-woman match. I think SummerSlam had a 5 or 6 woman match. What that's the kind of booking that says, well, we need to have the women on the show. We only have 15 minutes for the women on a 3-hour plus show. So let's stick them all in one match and let's say we had a women's match. No, there are lots of great talented women. I watched NXT last night. I know it's Friday. I didn't watch it until Thursday, so forgive me. I watched it a day late. Last night's NXT show, there with Asuka now making the move up to Raw after her injury and her title being vacated. You see that NXT's got a lot of women that could be part of something that could be a burgeoning promotion type thing. I honestly think that this could go on the road and make money on its own. You could almost have, you could have the Raw tour, you could have the SmackDown tour, you could have a women's tour and an NXT tour. NXT doesn't tour regularly, but they are going back out here in a couple of weeks. And then maybe just give us a taste of the women on Raw or SmackDown, kind of like they do 205 Live, right? They give us 205 Live matches on Raw at least, and then if you've ever been to a SmackDown Live TV taping, I hate to call it a TV taping because it's actually live, but the 205 Live is then broadcast on WWE Network at 10 o'clock after the SmackDown Live. And so I think the women could certainly do the same thing. Maybe if you're going to do the 205 Live after SmackDown, have the women at Raw on Monday nights after the Raw show. Of course, the Raw show being 3 hours, that might make it late. But anyway, I'm thinking out loud here. I still think the women should have their own show. I really think the women and their own promotion, because there are lots of talented women doing lots of good things, and they get so little TV time to develop storylines that it's really hurting the product. So there we go. I've talked about the women. There is a women's title match on Hell in a Cell. I'll go up the card this time. Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Roode. I kind of like what they're doing with Ziggler. He's going out and playing all these characters. I'm not sure about the Roode. Why Roode is now being pushed as a guy that is a face. Not sure about that. He was and is so good as a heel, but he was really good as a heel in NXT. Now he's coming out. Maybe this is just a setup for some sort of turn, and obviously, if you're making your way up the ladder, you got to beat Dolph Ziggler. That's just what Dolph Ziggler's role is now in WWE. He's a guy that you beat before you start moving your way up the ladder. So, and to do that, they're setting him as a face. But Roode will eventually be a heel and will be a good heel. Got a comment from Bob Harris. Got to meet Terry Funk last week, and Ricky and Lawler in Raleigh. I've not met Jerry Lawler, so I can't say. But Ricky Morton, one of my favorites, no question about it. I got a picture on my phone of meeting Ricky recently, but back in May, I guess. It feels recent to me because it doesn't feel that long ago, but just have a lot of good stories to tell about Ricky Morton. And Terry Funk, one of my favorite guys. He worked with us on the pay-per-view back in 2011, and I love the Funker from back in the 80s. 90s. I mean, as a kid growing up, he was one of my favorite guys in ring, and then also, of course, behind the scenes. Boy, his interviews were so great. And I'll tell you, I talked about how we wrote the show and developed stories and characters and anything else. We matched up Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer in a one-on-one match for that AWE Night of Legends show that we did. And for the promo interviews we did, all I did was turn the camera on. You're not going to tell Terry Funk anything. You don't need to. I mean, you'd be stupid to try to tell Terry Funk, hey, Terry, could you say this? I remember, and the video's on my YouTube channel, and you have to scroll back a few pages now, but I watched it again a couple weeks ago as I was researching this book I'm working on. Turn the camera on. We're at a high school gym show. I'm trying to get as many interviews as I can, help promote our show coming up. It was about a month out from the show. And hey Terry, okay, you're going up against Tommy. You guys know each other well. What do you think, man? Just here, turn the camera on. You go. And he was eating a hamburger at this high school gym from the concession stand, and I just remember him talking about, Tommy Dreamer's a lot like this hamburger. It's not very good, and he's kind of old. And from there, I mean, just classic stuff. Terry's awesome. So I'm sure you had a good time meeting Terry Funk. Um, so yeah, Bobby Roode's guy. He's wrestling the guy Ziggler you beat before you move your way up the ladder. AJ Styles, Baron Corbin. I've been critical of WWE for what it did to Baron Corbin, taking the Money in the Bank briefcase away from him, having him cash in and lose. I'm liking. I think I'm liking right now where he's going, where they're going with this, where he's going with this right now, because it's turned him into a darker character. Uh, and he's more believable to me now. I thought when he won that briefcase that it was a little bit, hey, why are they giving this to Baron Corbin? But now he seems like he's earning it. He's earning his spot. And he and AJ, it's been a nice little rivalry the last few weeks. So I'm kind of happy to see the evolution of that character. Still holding out because I still think they could have done it without taking the briefcase away from him. To me, the greatest prop ever devised in pro wrestling, even better than the actual titles themselves, because titles are just props. They're just something you put on a guy to legitimize him. We all know that as we watch pro wrestling. The briefcase, the unpredictability of when it's going to be cashed in, it's always hanging over the head. I mentioned the WrestleMania main event from a couple of years ago where Seth Rollins came out. I popped so loud in my little watch party here at the home office that it's something that's valuable, and when it's not available, it's sad. I mean, even when it's cashed in and used in a good way, I mourn its departure, because it means we don't have that again until the next Money in the Bank pay-per-view, which for us now is post WrestleMania. That's a long way off. Let's see. Comment from Anthony Young, and we'll divert and we'll get back to Hell in a Cell in just a second. Anthony Young, the Briscoe brothers from ROH live in my town. I sometimes make fried chicken and sandwiches at the gas station for them. That's my job. Hey, cool. It's one of those cool things that you get to run into guys like that and see them in a different light. That's one fortune that I've been able to have working in the business the last few years, is getting to know the guys outside of the ring and outside of also when they have a camera on them, and you get to see who's cool and who's not. And I'd say that, man, of all the people I've worked with, only one person, and I'm not, well, I guess it's Kevin Nash. Everybody else, I would say, is salt of the earth, great people to work with, so nice, bend over backwards well, that and Robbie E, actually. Robbie E would be the other I'd throw in there. But so 98% of the people I've worked with are absolutely awesome people, and so that's cool to be able to say, because there's always there's that old saying, you get let down when you meet your idols. And I've not been let down by except for about I wouldn't call Robbie E an idol, to say the least. And even Nash, the first several times we worked with him, was great to work with. It was only the last time that he wasn't. But hey, that's a pretty good batting average. That's a good free throw percentage, 98%. So cool that you get to hang out with those guys and see them in a different light too, as well. So we talked AJ Corbin, we talked Ziggler, Rude. New Day Usos. I love this feud. It's been going on for a while, and it's kind of like, I'd say this about the women's division. I was talking about, let's get the women's division back together into one, and mainly I want that because I want Sasha Banks versus Charlotte Flair from here to eternity. I mean, they could have as many matches as we needed. I would never get tired of those matches. New Day Usos, I'm the same way. I'm not tired of this feud, and I don't know that I can be. And now there's going to be in a Hell in a Cell match, even more so. The stakes are raised. The two best tag teams working right now, and I love, the Usos. I did not like when they were faces. I thought the gimmick was just, they were trying too hard, and not they, WWE was trying too hard making them be faces. As heels, they're awesome. They have that snarling look down their nose at you down, and same for New Day on an opposite way. At first, WWE was trying to make the New Day into heels, and they're too naturally glib on the mic. They're too funny. They were so funny as heels, we were rooting for them anyway, so we might as well make them faces. These are two tag teams that really, I mean, think back before New Day, because Usos have had 4 title runs and so have New Day, but when Usos had their title runs, the tag team division was an afterthought. It was almost the kind of thing you booked just because you had to have a tag team match. I mean, I know from having worked in booking and promotions for a few years, you want to have, of course, you have your card, but then you always want to have a title match. You want to have a tag team match. You want to have a women's match. And if you can, you have a midget match, right? Uh, so that was WWE was kind of like, okay, we have to have a tag match. Let's just throw the belts on the Usos and have them wrestle somebody. These are two tag teams that, when they wrestle each other, particularly, you want to watch. You want to watch that match. Um, they smile and tip their hats. Okay, well that's I'll call that hanging out. That's enough. That's Anthony's talking about he doesn't get to hang out with the Briscoes. He wanted to clarify, and that's fine. But Cook and they tip their hats. That's enough. Hopefully they seem like nice guys. Hopefully they come across as good, especially in that relationship, right? Because boy, if you're working at your job, cashier or cook or anything like that, waiting tables. I mean, I've done all these jobs in my past too, on my way up the ladder, however far I am now. How do people treat you when you're in that job? I worked, gosh, when I was in college, I was a cashier at this small grocery store, and people were interesting, to say the least, sometimes. So yeah, that's you can kind of see people in a different light when you see them in that light. So. Shane and Kevin Owens in a Hell in a Cell match. They only bring Shane out for important things. For opportunities to jump off cages, I guess. This is we've known for a while that this was going to be a match. We thought it was going to be at SummerSlam. It's better here, obviously. And I think Kevin Owens is right now. He and The Miz are wrestling's two best heels. From a classic standpoint, they are guys that make you just want to you want, even though it's sports entertainment, it's not wrestling, it's not real. They're not really saying these things to each other because they mean it. They're saying it because it's scripted. That said, you still want their heads knocked off because they're so arrogant and they're so good. As a result, that means they're good at their job. They make you forget that you're watching entertainment. And they make you say, God, that Kevin Owens, I can't believe what he said. I can't believe he headbutted Vince McMahon. So Shane and KO, that's going to be an awesome match. Shane wrestles twice a year. He steals the show when he does. Think last year, climbing the cage in the match with Undertaker. Think at WrestleMania, him and AJ Styles. I mean, how does he only does this again a couple times a year, but how does he puts on the 5-star match every show, and he's not a wrestler. That's the thing. He's not a wrestler. He was out. He was even gone from the business for several years, overseas in China, trying to jumpstart a company that eventually didn't do so well. And he's not a young guy either. That gray in his hair. He's older than I am, late 40s, and he kicks ass when he's out there. So that's gonna be a good match. It's gonna be a fun match. Were the rest of Shane's jumps real, Anthony Young asked? I have to assume so. Now think back to the Hell in a Cell last year. You could tell if you watched that replay several times that the table was, and this is smart. I mean, you don't want these guys to get hurt, but the table had some springs under it to kind of shelter that fall, because you don't fall from a 20-foot cage onto a table and not have some serious injuries. So because there was a kind of a bounce effect when he hit and bounced off. And of course, the thing is about those jumps, that's great. They prepared for it. They reinforced the table, but still, you got to hit it right. And you've only got one chance. You screw it up, one chance up, you're getting carted out of there. Maybe they're scraping you off the floor. So Shane, yeah, he that move he does where he puts the trash can down in these hardcore matches, puts a trash can down, sets you in the against the one turnbuckle and goes to the other side of the ring and jumps from that turnbuckle and does that that sort of drop kick move across the. Nobody else does that. That takes some athleticism. It's interesting athleticism from a guy that again doesn't do this full time. Yeah, I think they were real. I mean, I can't imagine that they, the realest ones were Mick Foley, the first one, just because Vince didn't want him to do the first one in the match with Undertaker, and the second one, neither one of them thought was going to happen when Undertaker chokeslammed him through the cage, because that wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to land on the cage and not fall through 20 feet. But yeah, real. They're prepared for them. That still doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt like hell. Maybe that's why he wrestles just twice a year, because we got to recover from that kind of stuff. That can take some time. You don't want to be back out there Monday night and Tuesday and traveling on Wednesday to when you got those bumps to heal. So top of the card at Hell in a Cell, Nakamura and Mahal, and as before SummerSlam, I was saying as much. I'm a huge Nakamura mark, so I admit that ahead of time. I want to see the belt on him eventually. But that said, I was saying before SummerSlam that Mahal needed to keep the belt that day because I want to see him a legitimate champion. If you take a belt away from somebody too quick, the question started, hey, did he do something behind the scenes to get the belt taken from him? Was he just sort of an interstitial champion in between two guys that are supposed to run with it? And so I think at this point Mahal's had the belt for a while. And I love the character. I mean, he's a classic foreign bad guy heel. He's another one of those guys that makes you just want to see him get his block knocked off when he's out there. I love the gimmick with the Singh brothers and what they're doing. I mean, he's got his protection ring with him. Four Horsemen helping him sneak out of matches. So there's never really a clean fall as far as that goes. But he's got some wins over some big talents. And for Nakamura, now this is why it might be important if you're a Nakamura fan to see Nakamura win this match. At this point, he's been given some opportunities too. He's beaten Orton, he's beaten Cena, second time main eventing a pay-per-view in a championship match. Well, he didn't main event SummerSlam, but he was in a championship match SummerSlam. Now main eventing this one, I assume, for the championship. If he loses this one, it's hard to justify keeping him at the top of the ladder but he's got to work his way back down if he doesn't win this one. One limitation for him is that his limited command of the English language. He's a rock star with the fans. It hasn't hurt him yet, but does the champion need to be better communicating with the fans? That's maybe the only question holding him back at this stage. And again, maybe he could benefit from having a mouthpiece, like a Paul Heyman-like person to help him out there. But that match should be a good one as far as that goes. So I think top to bottom, this card looks interesting to me. And again, I said that before No Mercy. Actually, I didn't say top to bottom for No Mercy. The top two matches were interesting to me there, all the way down to Ziggler Roode. I'm excited as far as how things are going. Do I know how it feels to go through a table? No, Anthony, I appreciate how informative you are. Talk about the art. One thing I was smart enough to do or not do, as the case may be, I helped book the shows, wrote the shows, I marketed the shows. I even appeared in the ring in an announcing capacity. I was also on TV in an announcing capacity. Never trained to wrestle because that just looks painful. Now, I say that I'm a marathon runner, and it's interesting. You think running 26 miles, that's also pretty hard, but there are no bumps. Don't ever they don't throw you in the road. They don't run you over with a car. So I would run a marathon any day before I take a single bump. But the companies I worked with had training schools, and I remember seeing the guys running the ropes. It's the simplest thing you think in a wrestling match. I mean, other than just the collar and elbow tie up that they do. This starts most matches. Running the ropes. The guys, as they're learning how to run the ropes, they get these big whelps on their back because as they're learning how to hit the ropes, they're steel cables. If you've ever been to a show early, like really early when they're setting the ring up, and you probably haven't, but if you ever get the chance, you'll see what I'm telling you is true. When they're building the ring, because when you put a show on, you're there all day. When they're building the ring, you might think, oh yeah, there's trampolines and it's soft and everything else. No, it's not. It's steel beams with plywood over top of it with a little thin canvas. There's no give there. It's canvas on top of wood on top of steel. The only reason it bounces is because it is a few feet up in the air. And so whatever give there is in the steel when a body hits when a body slam happens or whatever else happens. And then those ropes are steel cables. The turnbuckles are there. Yeah, the turnbuckles are padded, but they're slight padding on top of, again, where steel connects. I mean, this is painful. Everything they do when they land, anytime, don't take for granted that because you've seen 100 superplexes or super AAs like John Cena did on Roman Reigns. The padding around the floor, it's still concrete floor, and there's no give there. It's not suspended in the air. Anytime these guys take a bump, it's painful. The art of wrestling is that they've learned how to sort of spread that pain out, because that's what wrestling school does. I mean, in addition to teaching you moves and everything else, you learn how to fall the right way so that it still hurts, but it doesn't injure you. And when injuries happen, is because you've done something wrong. Either you or your opponent, who's also your partner in the ring, has done something wrong. They've either thrown you the wrong way or you've landed the wrong way. I mean, a simple thing like a body slam. When they throw you to the mat in a body slam, think about, you're watching the back hit the mat, but actually their legs are spread out to allow that pain to dissipate out all the way through their legs. So it's a simple thing, but it's a very important thing, because if they did land all on their back, they wouldn't get up. That's why that move can be so devastating looking and yet not devastating in actuality. It hurts, but it doesn't debilitate. Suplex, same thing. I mean, the pain, the essence of the art of how these guys take these bumps is they spread that pain out over as wide an area as possible, so that, again, one bone or one small part of your body isn't subjected to that intense pain. It just spreads out. But still, that said, they wrestle 15 minutes in a night, take 5, 6, 7, 10 bumps, whatever they end up taking. That's still that's painful. I mean, they get used to it. When you talk about ring rust, you hear announcers talk about ring rust. They're talking on two levels to you there. The one level is, as a fan, if you think you're watching a real athletic competition, oh yeah, if you haven't played basketball in a year and you go out there and try to play a basketball game, your shooting form is going to be off, your wind's not going to be there, that kind of thing. But in wrestling, yeah, okay, so if you were wrestling in a real straight up match, you hadn't wrestled a live match in a year, yeah, it'd be tough. But also because when they do it every night, you're used to the pain, even though you feel it, you're conditioned to it. When you haven't done it in a while, learning how to take that pain is hard. That's what I've been told. I know when I run, I try to run 2 marathons a year, one in the spring and one in the fall. As much as I train for those marathons, and I think there's probably some similarities here to wrestling. When I train for those marathons, no matter how much you train, you don't run 26 miles at one time in training. The most you do in training is 20 miles. And so no matter how hard you've worked, hundreds of miles you've put in to get ready for that marathon, mile 21 is still hard. And so for these guys out there, every night they go out there, they're taking pain. They're trying to figure out how to get through it, not get hurt and injured, and then wrestle the next night. It's a tough job, tough business. And we as fans get the advantage of watching those guys take pain that we don't have to take. With a chair. Oh, I'm trying to catch up here. I've seen Bob's Mahoney hit a dude in the head and knocked him right out for real with a chair. I watched Anthony. I watched those shows. I was a huge ECW fan back in the day, and now I feel guilty for it when I watch them now, with what we know about CTE. I mean, with football players. Same thing with wrestlers. And there's a reason WWE doesn't allow chair shots anymore, because now we know about concussions. Those guys in ECW, man, there's a reason a lot of those guys are dead now. Because they took shots. They took shots off of with chairs unprotected to the head. I'm thinking of New Jack flying off of balconies onto tables on the guys. I mean, among the many, many things that they did to entertain us, very reckless to their bodies. And when you're in your 20s, maybe you don't feel the pain quite so much. When you're in your 30s, maybe you start to feel a little bit. You get in your 40s, and a lot of these guys, Balls Mahoney, these guys were wrestling now or up until their death. In some of those guys' cases, unfortunately, it adds up. It adds up, and so there's no way to take a chair shot to the head. Without your hands up, and even then you're still getting something through there to squish the brain around and squish it around in your head. So there's a reason those things don't happen anymore. I know it. I'm one of those who jokes when I'm watching, hey, get the tables out, but the table actually is not a bad thing. The table actually helps break a fall a little bit. It looks good, sounds good, crunches and everything else, but it actually is part of the the way they gig the tables. It actually helps. It's no different really than falling onto the mat, but it also looks good. So that's fine. It's the moves where jumping off of a cage even onto a table, as long as the table is and you land right on the table, and uh, the table is properly set up for you. You land on the right table. There's 3 tables at ringside at WWE shows. Land on the right one. I'm sure not all 3 are gigged to have springs and kind of absorb some of your fall. Land on the right table and land on the right way, and you're probably going to be okay. But headshots, no, you don't want at this. What we know about CTE, headshots are just not going to happen anymore, unprotected. If they do happen, think about that match between Shinsuke Nakamura and John Cena from a few weeks ago, actually a couple months ago now, when Shinsuke did his exploder on Cena, and Cena either didn't know that it was going to be the exploder, thought it was going to be a suplex, and didn't land. He landed on his head, or he just didn't get enough of a jump into the move. Either way, he landed on his head awkwardly, and it was very scary live, especially. And Shinsuke says sorry to him, and of course Cena says you don't have to be sorry. But that the reason that stood out is because that's rare. You don't see people take those kind of hits to the head because because we know what we know about CTE. Let's see here. What else we got? So, Jinder Mahal. Yeah, Susan Howard. I'm sure. Sometimes spell check is not our friend. Yeah, from a straight up standpoint, Jinder Mahal his status would be enhanced if he would. Maybe this Hell in a Cell will do it. I still think even Hell in a Cell, the writers will figure out a way to have the Singh brothers interfere and get into the Cell and be involved. Unfortunately, I think that's the case. It would be, from a standpoint of selling Jinder Mahal as a legit champion, it would help if he would win a match without having to have some help from outside, either those guys or Great Khali, which I thought was a nice surprise at that pay-per-view. When he beat Randy Orton with the help of Great Khali, but at some point you got to win a match on your own to feel completely and totally legitimate. I still love the Jinder Mahal character, and what they're doing with him. Making him into that foreign heel. The classic foreign heel dating back to Russians when the Koloffs or Vladimir. Oh, who was it? Vladimir, not the Koloffs were in NWA, WCW. Gosh, why am I forgetting the guys? The Nikolai Volkov, back in the mid '80s at the Rock and Wrestling height. The bad guy Japanese wrestlers from back in the '70s and '60s. I mean, the foreign heel is a lost art. We hadn't had one in a while, and Jinder Mahal's they're really dusting that off and using it well with Jinder, especially. I know it was controversial last week, but that racist tirade he had last week aimed at Shinsuke Nakamura drew attention, it drew heat, and it was one minority talking to another. If you can call a person who represents 1.3 billion Indians a minority, right? There are a lot more of them than there are of us in this world, but here in the United States, maybe not so much. So, I like what they're doing with him, and I hope, when he loses the belt, which he obviously has to at some point, I hope that his place is still pretty high in the business, because I think back to the 3MB. Now, Heath Slater had a run with the tag belts, but it was a comedy run. You look at what they're doing with Drew McIntyre now down in NXT. He's a champion. He's clearly, and he showed his star potential in TNA. Now he's realizing it in NXT. He's going to move to the main roster in the next year, so he's going to be a star there too. He's got the look, he's got the mic, everything else. And then you look at Mahal. He was underutilized for a long time. You read stories now about how Dusty Rhodes, when they were training Jinder Mahal back when he was a young wrestler, before you even saw him on TV, and Dusty Rhodes says that kid's got it. That kid's going to be a heel one day, and so he's going to be a monster heel one day. Dusty Rhodes knew what he was talking about in a lot of cases, right? So he certainly had Jinder Mahal pegged. Well, Anthony, thank you for the comment. I was laughing at Anthony's comment. We're going to wrap this one up because we're getting close to an hour. And thank you, and thanks everyone for paying attention and watching today. I'll try to announce these better, Anthony, so it doesn't pop up randomly, right? Next time we'll actually give you a heads up. We do these once a week. I haven't been doing it on Facebook Live once a week. I've been doing podcast once a week. but I've just started experimenting with Facebook Live to see how it works. This worked great. I love the comments. Thanks for the comments. That makes it feel like people are actually engaging. So that makes it feel like I'm actually doing something worthwhile here. So Anthony, thank you. Susan, thank you. Others who commented, Chris Barrows, I saw commenting. Didn't get to respond to yours quickly enough, hopefully. But thanks everyone for watching on Facebook Live. Those who are listening on the podcast, thank you as well. And AugustaFreePress.com is the website. We cover lots of news, so not everything there is going to be certainly of a wrestling nature, but we do cover wrestling on a regular basis. We'll come back next week with a preview, our final preview of Hell in a Cell. Then we'll come back after next Sunday night show, 11 o'clock ish, whatever time the show ends. Sometimes they go over. We'll come back with another live Facebook and a podcast to review that show. So please make a date to join us then. That'd be great. Joyce Waters, thank you too. So thanks everyone for being a part of this show today. And we're going to go ahead and sign off. Everyone, have a great weekend.